Hello and welcome to Layered Future. If you're new to the channel, what you need to know is that everything I produce focuses on how technology impacts the human experience. If you've been here before, welcome back. This is actually the third part of a three-part series that's exploring how technology and the world around us shapes who we are, who we become, and how the rapid evolution of technology that we're currently in and facing with AI is going to speed things up even more. So you can go back if you want and listen to the first part. The first part's called Different Worlds, Different People. Then the second part, The Compression of Reality. I'll put some links up there on the top right now. But you can also listen to this as a standalone lecture. I've designed them all to work perfectly fine by themselves. I might call back to some of the other bits in other lectures, but you can just watch it as you are. Anyway, I've gone on enough already. Let's get going. So section 1 is called The End of Stability. So this lecture is really about how the technological environment that we are approaching now is going to create, I believe, quite an unstable environment for us where things are evolving quicker than we can catch up. Okay, so to start with, I wanted to highlight that for most of human history, change has happened relatively slowly, or at least slowly enough that societies have been able to adapt. So let's be clear, technology has always changed things. It doesn't matter how far you go back thousands of years, hundreds of years, whatever. It's always clearly changed how we live our lives, but it's done so at a pace that we can keep up with, really. At least we can, we're really adaptable, as the other lectures in parts 1 and part 2 have hopefully really clarified. We're very adaptable, but we still need a chance to adapt. And over the long course of history, we've been able to do that in line with technological change. People once expected the world they inherited to resemble the world they left behind. And I just think that's so important, and it's something that I think a lot of people feel now that this has changed, but we don't talk about it enough. There was this sort of idea of generational stability where you would be born as part of a particular generation and things would, of course, change and evolve slowly, but what you did for your job, you expect your kids to be doing. What your kids were doing, you'd kind of expect your grandchildren to be doing something related to it. But that has changed, and it's really changed dramatically following the Industrial Revolution, but particularly, hugely, during the digital revolution as well. So yeah, today that assumption is becoming increasingly difficult to maintain, and that's really purely, I would say, because of rapid technological change, which has driven wider changes in the world, whether that's on a national level or an international level. Instead of technology changing the environment occasionally, it's now changing it continuously. I'll give you a really good example of this, all right? So you've got a smartphone, no doubt, or a laptop, both, some sort of tablet device, a desktop, any of the myriad tech devices that you have. And they'll have software on them. So let's think of something, if you're a creative like me, you might use something like Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator or InDesign and all these programs. But even if you're not doing that kind of thing with technology and you're just using apps on your phone, they're updating all the time. I do a lot of video editing, so I will sit down to edit a video. I'm not just talking about for the YouTube channel, I do it on a freelance basis as well for advertising, marketing and things. And I will sit down, open up Adobe Premiere and realize that a particular tool I need has been moved or has disappeared, or a new tool has come in, or a new different sort of workflow is now built into that program. And that is a rate of change that we've never experienced before. It's like imagine you're a mechanic, you go to the garage that you work in, you walk in there and all of a sudden, all the tools are different, or one of your tools has gone missing and it's been replaced by something that does the same job in a different way. Technology has created this scenario, digital tech, because you can edit it, and because there's an expectation that you need to compete with other forms of software, other apps or whatever. As a company, they will update them continuously. And that creates this really strange, ever morphing environment. And really, we have to talk about AI within this, because I think it's the most powerful accelerator of change that humanity has ever created. Not currently, it's obviously changing things hugely, whether you look at the beneath the surface stuff, like the way that it's accelerating medical research and scientific discovery and other tech changes, because it's doing that and has been for a long time really, or whether you're looking at LLMs and things like ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, Claude, whatever you might use as your AI of choice. But it's important to realize that we haven't even really entered the AI revolution properly yet. And as this technology progresses, it's going to change so much stuff. It's different to any other technology that's preceded it, because it's going to lead to exponential change in this kind of upward curve where it's going to drag all other or most other technologies up with it, because of the sheer range, the speed at which it can do a range of iterations of technologies. And that's just going to supercharge really so much stuff. And because of that, I believe that we're entering an era where adaptation itself may become a permanent requirement for humans. And that's really what this lecture is about. But I think it's one of the most important areas that everyone should be thinking about. So on an individual level, like you listening to this, hear me thinking about, musing over these things, but also governments, organizations, nations, the globe as a whole needs to kind of stop and reflect on how, when you suddenly have a technology that can change everything very, very quickly, it can improve itself, it can change the way that other technologies are built, how the knock-on effect of that is that people need to adapt along with it. So that's why I'm making this lecture in a nutshell. So section 2 is called the Great Accelerator. So this is where we're going to drill down a little bit into AI and talk about how it is going to ramp things up and supercharge really the evolution of the world around us, the environment around us. So previous technologies extended human capability, but AI extends cognition itself. That's a dramatic thing. So let's pause to reflect on that just for a second. So thinking isn't just a process we go through to solve problems. Thinking is who we are, what we are. It's what we do. So AI can be seen as a massive amplifier of humanity in many ways, because it is going to amplify thinking and therefore amplify who we are and our potential. Because for the first time, humans have created a tool that can participate in knowledge work. I think we need to come up with a new word for for what AI is really, because tool doesn't quite cut it. But, the best word we've got at the moment is tool. It is a tool. It's something that we use at the moment, but as it becomes more autonomous with things like agentic AI agents that we send off to do stuff for us, the term tool doesn't really cut it in my mind. But anyway, even right now, AI can participate in writing, coding, analysis, planning, adjusting, creating. So it can take on the knowledge work that forever humans have done. As I touched upon earlier, this changes the speed at which ideas can be developed and deployed. And really, that's an understatement. We've effectively strapped the combined potential of human capability to a rocket that we're getting ready for launch now. So I really want to highlight that, because it's not just a tool that will save us time, which is what so many pieces of software and devices have done previously. This is something that is going to dramatically change what thinking is and what humans are capable of. As AI improves, the rate of change may increase across multiple industries simultaneously. So the reason I'm saying this is because I want to underline the fact that it's not going to impact a small cluster of industries. It's going to impact industry more widely. So technological changes don't happen in isolation. So when the car was invented, I talked about car in the previous two parts of this series. I won't go on about it too long, but The car didn't just help get people from A to B, it completely revolutionized how industry works, completely revolutionized how products could be taken from one place to another, components to make products could be taken from one place to another. So it rewrote the mechanisms that underlie industry. And so technological changes don't happen in isolation, they each impact one another, and then they also compound, and then they lift each other up. So another example would be nuclear power, increased energy production, but think about what electricity enables. So nuclear power can produce lots of energy. I'm not going to go into the rights and wrongs of nuclear power. People have differing opinions about that, but it can generate electricity, almost limitless electricity. And think about all the things that are enabled from that. So instead of having to burn through fossil fuels, which are finite, we are refining uranium and then generating electricity from that. And it reduces the cost of electricity, it pushes more electricity into more areas, and then that fuels industry. Okay, so it's not just made it easier to heat your home, it's also changed the way that iPhones are made. Yeah, so it's a huge kind of complex web of lifting up. When some technology is developed, it lifts up surrounding technologies, and then technologies that relate to that, and so on. So going back to AI, the challenge is actually not, I don't think, AI itself, but the speed of its integration. So I think this is an important distinction because as it stands, AI is just a very powerful technology that, in theory, could only lead to good things if everyone made the right decisions. Okay, so let me unpack that a little bit. What I mean is, if we could write the perfect plan for the rollout of AI and make sure that no bad actors used it for terrible things, make sure that we could control AI so it didn't get out of control and in some way harm us, if we could just funnel it into medical research, science, education, entertainment, all the different things that we tend to invest in to try and improve our lives, then in theory it could only be good. But that's not the way, it's never the way that technology is rolled out. So once technology is invented, it is quite often seized because of people want to make money out of it, make their lives easier, want to change their workflows, the way they do things. It's used for a huge range of reasons. And so at the moment, we're in this stage where we're in a discovery phase, really, I suppose, where we're trying to work out how we can use AI in different sectors. And all the time there's people thinking, I can use it for this, use it for that. There's no consideration generally. Well, I shouldn't say no consideration. There isn't enough consideration as to the knock-on impact for people, the knock-on impact for society. And I'm not talking about job loss, although that is clearly a significant issue. I'm talking about how, for example, rolling out AI as a friend, having AI as someone you can talk to, how does that impact the individual? How does that impact society? There's never any kind of open debate and discussion before these technologies are rolled out, because that's not the way the world works. If someone can create an app that keeps someone company and someone's prepared to pay for it, then that app is going to be a success and it's going to take off and more people will use it. It is the capitalist society that we live in. So it's the speed of AI's integration, which is what most concerns me, and I think concerns most people as well. There's also the issue that while human beings adapt fairly quickly, institutions adapt much more slowly. So already most people, myself, you no doubt, have access to AI models that you can use, I can use, for an infinite array of things. But governments, education, law, all that kind of thing, they're only really just beginning to attempt to adapt to the new world that AI has enabled. There's talk about copyright, there's talk about the safety aspects of AI. There's talk, certainly I work in education, there's a lot of talk about how AI can be used within education and how student work could be done by AI. And so we need to work out new ways to assess people and all that kind of thing. So because humans can pivot fairly quickly. I mean, I've pivoted some of the work I do to incorporate AI. I use AI in loads of different ways, but I can do that as an individual. But a company is a bit like a large ship that needs to turn around in the ocean. It takes time. You can't just turn on a dime, as they say. You can't just literally spin it round. You need to, it might take several miles to be able to turn around a large oil tanker or something. And it's the same type of thing with organizations when they're trying to deal with the new world that AI has created. Another kind of byproduct of AI may be that the gap between technological capability and societal readiness will continue to widen. I mean, I think it will. There's always a lag effect. So, for example, social media is right now, being talked about being banned in the UK for children under the age of 16. It's already happened in Australia, and no doubt other countries around the world will do that. And that's off the back of realising that it can have serious impacts on people's development, safety issues, all those different things. That's 2 decades after it emerged, 20 years after social media emerged. The first social media I used was MySpace, and that was back in about 2005 or 6 or something like that. And when this is being recorded in 2026, so it's a couple of decades, and there's a huge lag effect as to the way that governments deal with the impact of technologies. Now, if you then take into account how the capabilities of AI, the power of AI, and then think about, well, it's been used in the public sphere for a few years. Most people, if you say to them, what do you know about AI, they'll mention ChatGPT. So it's really since the original ChatGPT was launched, and that's not been very long. And so let's zoom forward 20 years. I mean, where do you think AI is going to be in 20 years? I've got my own rough ideas, but no one knows. This technology, a technology that can help rewrite itself and do that at lightning speed, is going to progress and evolve incredibly quickly. So the landscape that we'll be in the 2040s will be very different to the landscape we're in now. And so governments, nations, I think, really need to think about this, because we're not ready for what's coming down the road. I don't think we were ready for AI at all. I don't think we were ready for using LLMs like ChatGPT, Grok, Claude. I don't think we were ready for it. We certainly weren't ready for it in business, in education, because it just landed. I mean, how can you be ready for a technology that just lands? And that's the way technology tends to emerge. We don't get a warning in 3 years' time, you'll have access to this. Start reading these guides now. If only it was like that, because it would give us the chance to adapt our working processes and our ways of being so that we're ready for it. Okay, so this section's called Continuous Transition. Periods of stability are important because they help people develop a sense of certainty and orientation. So we often talk about stability as being a bit boring, it's just kind of stable, just sort of like, edging along or whatever. But stability is important because it allows us to better predict what's coming around the corner, and then that gives us a slight sense of ease, yeah? So in that sense, contentment relies, to an extent at least, on some predictability. And I think humans are at their best when they have at least some idea of what next year will be like, what the year after will be like. Continuous change, on the other hand, makes it hard to build these lasting expectations. So, as I said, stability is important, and expectations are also important because they provide a sense of psychological stability. Technology, however, increasingly forces us to rewrite those expectations. This is most clear in working environments. So I was trained as an illustrator, graphic designer. I did a degree in illustration and did a master's degree in graphic design. So I was taught within that about using certain technologies. That was in the 2000s. I graduated from my degree, I think, in 2007, if I remember correctly. But the software and the stuff we were using then is kind of outdated now, hugely outdated actually. I think I was using Photoshop 7 or something back then. For anyone who uses Photoshop, they'll know, if they're as old as me, they'll know that it was far less capable, very different, looked totally different. So software is changing, but also the general working practices are changing as well. A lot of illustrators work entirely digitally now. But when I was at uni, most people, in fact, I was one of the only people in my group who was doing a lot of digital illustration. So anyway, expectations of what we're going to receive further down the road are important, and technology is making us have to rethink that more and more, and certainly much, much more quickly, which understandably makes people less content, can make people quite unhappy, because the future becomes more difficult to predict as the rules keep changing. Now, if you go back about 10 years, there were few people that were worried about AI taking over their job. Yeah. So I don't remember anyone saying anything about AI being able to take over their job. If I think back to when I did my master's degree, I had to create this thing called a critical research paper, I think it was, which was basically like a thesis. And what I was exploring was how creativity can be manipulated and changed. It was about the psychology of creativity. And I wrote within that a short piece about how, while computers are really useful tools for people to create stuff, they can't create things by themselves. And they will never be able to create things by themselves. I wrote that, and that was back in 2009. Now, look, there'll be people out there maybe who are into computer science and things and will think, oh, you should have realised this was coming. But look, I was just a normal creative person doing research into creative areas, and it wasn't on my radar. So a decade ago, people weren't thinking about AI taking over their job, but now most people who can see what this technology is capable of, I think, realise that it can't not eat into almost all areas of thinking work and knowledge work. There's no way that it can't. It is already. People are seeing that happening in front of their eyes. And depending on what sector you work in, will depend on how much you're having to use or being asked to use or are exploring this technology. But the reality is that the emergence of AI has all but removed any sense of predictability about what the workplace will be like in the next 10 years. The thing is, many people already feel as though the pace of modern life exceeds their ability to keep up. Now, this used to be the reserve of older generations. So it's a classic thing, isn't it, where an older person is asking a younger person, how does this thing work? How do you use this thing? And I know I certainly do it with my parents. I'm always helping them to get a new phone, how to store photos on the cloud and all that sort of stuff. My parents are in their 80s, so that, they didn't grow up with this sort of technology, so they get a lot of their information and guidance from me. But now, people in their 20s and 30s are starting to feel this disconnect between technology and their knowledge base and their ability to keep up. Now, that is unprecedented. That is probably, in my mind, the clearest signal that things are changing, when you've got younger people saying, well, I don't really know how that works. In fact, if you were to ask the vast majority of people how AI works, I think the majority would struggle to explain to you about its use of tokens and how it exists in the cloud in these vast data centers that mimic aspects of our brains, these huge neural networks. So I think that technology has become invisible to an extent and more powerful. There's almost like a direct correlation between its increased invisibility and its increase in power, and that's causing issues with how we can keep up. So AI will likely intensify this feeling by accelerating change even further. As I said earlier about it lifting other technologies up, it's going to have an impact across the board. It's not just going to be localized to the use of AI. It's going to be spread out across different technologies, different areas of life. So going back to our need to feel at least some sense of certainty, you can see how that's going to be a problem as AI really begins to accelerate and embed itself into so many areas, lifting up so many different parts of society, technologies and ways of working, how that's going to cause a problem. overall. And the result could be a society that spends more time in transition than it does in a state of stability. And that's new. And to me, that's concerning, because clearly the tools we build and the technology we develop, they're all supposed to enhance the human experience. They're supposed to make us have better lives, assist us in having a better quality of life, not to weaken our human experience. And spending our lives getting used to change isn't the best road to contentment. If we're constantly not knowing what's coming, constantly having to adapt what we do because technology is shifting the world around us, then clearly that's not the best situation to be in. I think that for some people, obviously younger generations particularly, adaptation may become a lifelong process rather than temporary phase. And that's the kind of permanent adaptation that I'm talking about, the state of, having to permanently adapt, a perpetual state of having to adjust how we live just to fit into a world that's rapidly changing around us. Okay, so section 4 is called Information, Trust and Reality. Human societies have always depended on shared understandings of reality. That's the foundation of trust. We need to trust each other in order that we can be content, and work together and head in the same direction. But these things are under threat, and they're under threat because of technology. So clearly, digital technology has already made information abundant. And in last week's lecture, I talked about that a little bit. The internet has totally changed the paradigm of information access. For anyone who was born after the internet was invented, obviously you haven't experienced a world pre-internet, but it was a place where gaining information was a lot slower, a lot more restrictive. And the emergence of the internet has therefore changed our relationship with information, and it's done it rapidly and permanently. So moving into the future, artificial intelligence may make information generation effectively limitless. So already people are exploring using AI to generate new stuff. And the generation of synthetic content is already only limited by hardware and energy. Anyone can generate hundreds of images, thousands of words or text with cheap-to-access AI models right now. And as I said earlier, we're in the early stages of the information artificial intelligence revolution. So this is only going to increase. Now, there are hardware bottlenecks at the moment. There's, for example, massive shortages of RAM and chips and different things. But these are areas we will overcome. Technology, computer chips are always improving in terms of efficiency, and our AI models are also improving massively in terms of efficiency. So these bottlenecks are going to eventually disappear. The friction that currently exists with regards to generating new stuff using AI is going to gradually ebb away. And we're going to enter a world, I would imagine, where every single day billions of pieces of content are generated, because it can be created, and it can be created very quickly and very cheaply. So the internet once merely connected people to information. I don't mean merely like it's a small thing. It's not. It's a huge thing, and it's changed society and civilization. But I think that the general kind of perspective of society was that the internet was almost the ultimate form that information connection could take. That we've invented this global network where you can access digitally, instantly, information. And I think for a lot of people, myself included, it's like, wow, this is, we've kind of gone to the zenith of this now. We can now access information instantaneously. I can share stuff with people across the globe in a second. And so, this is, we've hit the summit here. But now we've entered a world where AI can create information, okay? And that's an entirely new situation, and it's not one we've ever been in before, and I don't think most people ever thought we would be in. We've created systems that generate information, and prior to that, information was generated by us. And I'm not dismissing our ability to generate new stuff, because we're the only creatures that we know of that can do this, and we do it very, very well. But compared to AI, we are slow, we are biological. Using myself as an example, someone who creates illustrative work and designs stuff, I can't create 150 new illustrations a day. AI can do that in an hour, in half an hour, in 5 minutes. And the time it takes to be able to generate really high quality, professional level quality images, video, music, games, all that kind of stuff is going to shrink to virtually nothing in the coming years. Now, there's a million reasons why that can potentially be an issue, but as synthetic media improves, so it gets better, and it can be produced more quickly, distinguishing reality from fabrication is going to become harder. Already, it's quite hard. We can't be sure that what we see, read, hear, or watch in the digital space, in the digital landscape, is real. We don't know. Deep fakes and fabricated information are everywhere. You're listening or watching this right now. How do you know I'm real? I could quite easily be an AI avatar. This voice could be trained, and this is just text that's being generated by AI. Okay. Now, let me just say that's not the case. If I was an AI, I would say that, wouldn't I? No, but it's not the case. I am real, just to be clear. But you don't know. You have to, really, you've got to look at my channel, look at the other body of work. You've got to make a judgment on it. We're going to get to the stage where we need to make judgment calls on these things. Is this real? Is this not real? But in light of all this, how can trust not become one of the most valuable resources in the future? We used to be able to have information delivered to us from trusted sources that we relied on, and we were verified. We knew what we were seeing was based on fact and truth. But I think authenticity will have more and more value as we move forward. Provenance tracking, for example, so working out systems that can give us information on where these things came from and how they were accessed and recorded or whatever, will probably become a default standard that we use to gain trust in sources. We've got to work out new systems as we enter a world where we'll be swimming through content, not literally, but we will be swimming through an endless kind of swamp of material. So when we look at the internet emerging in the 90s, and then obviously how that's evolved and really came into its own in the 2000s, we had access to loads of information, but the challenge is becoming a shift from accessing information now to verifying it. I think it's one of the biggest problems we face. How can we know who or what to trust? And this also highlights the absolutely essential role, in my opinion, that critical thinking plays both now and in the future. I've done a video about the importance of critical thinking. As a lecturer, as a course leader of a degree, I talk to my students about criticality in their thinking, how to look at information, weigh up different sources, look at things from different angles, different sides. And I think that actually, outside of the world of academia, outside of the world of education, critical thinking is going to be discussed more and more. I think it should be, because it's an absolutely essential life skill anyway. It's going to be even more essential as we march headlong into this future. Section 5 is called Identity in a Changing Landscape. Human identity develops within relatively stable environments. So in the first lecture of this series, I looked into, discussed and explored how humans develop in ways that enable them to cope with and flourish as well in the world they find themselves in. So I was talking about how we all share the same cognitive biological hardware. And if you go back in time, if you go back 20,000 years, the humans that you met, very, very similar, very tiny adjustments, but very almost identical hardware. But humans develop and form themselves, shape themselves based on the environments they find themselves in so they can flourish. Okay, a Roman, as an example, let's think about someone living in ancient Rome. Now, they would struggle here, and we would struggle in ancient Rome. And in the last lecture, I talked about that, using an example of a medieval person coming from the medieval period to now and us going back to the medieval period. Rapid environmental change can create uncertainty, though, about where we belong. So if you find yourself, if any human finds themselves living in a world that's in a state of constant kind of flux, it means it's going to be harder for them, you, anyone to establish what they are supposed to be. How can they know how to react and react to the dynamics of life? When you're in an unstable environment, you take an insect and put it into a woodland area where it's evolved to live, perfectly happy, goes around, finds food, mates, produces eggs, so on, in this cycle of life. You take it out of that woodland environment, pop it into a city, may well still survive, but it's in this strange changing environment. It's moving from streets to roads to office blocks, and that uncertainty has evaporated. And what that leads to is an unhappy insect, and in our case, potentially, unhappy, discontented, and maybe even vulnerable people. The reality is that careers, communities, and social roles may become less predictable. It could be like living, this is the way I think of it, it could be like living in a house that's constantly in a state of rapid reconstruction. So I talked about an insect a moment ago, but let's put it into a human context. So imagine yourself living in a house that's in a constant state of really quick reconstruction. You go to the bathroom, you find it's the bedroom. Yeah, you walk into the garden, find it's full of plants one day, and then you go out the next day and it's just grass. So if you imagine the tech landscape, the environment that tech creates, it won't happen that quickly where you sort of walk out your door one day and there's buildings out there that you recognise the next day. They're strange theatres of glass and metal. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying careers, social life, just different roles in society will become less predictable. So what you're doing one year may be quite different to what you're expected to do the following year. And let's be clear, many traditional markers of progress are already becoming less reliable. So in the worlds of education, employment, social status, all of these things are morphing and changing under our feet as we speak. Technology is rapidly supercharging change through like a combination of AI, social media, and all that leads to a kind of societal uncertainty that's constantly hovering around us. So I think that all of this is likely to lead to a world where people are going to increasingly need to define themselves beyond their occupations. That's an important thing. And I think hopefully everything I'm saying within this is of relevance and importance, but I think this is particularly important because we've so long been used to a world where people have been defined in very different ways. So I think it's groundbreaking that this change in the way that we view ourselves and view other people may occur when you look over those past few hundred years of societal structure. One of the most common questions people get asked is, what do you do? What is your job? What do you do? I've been asked it 100 times. I remember once years ago, so fed up with saying I'm a lecturer or teacher and I do a bit of freelance work. It's complex when people ask me what I do because my main job has been in education really and in higher education, but I do freelance stuff. I do a bit of illustration, graphics, video work. Anyway, so I was at a wedding once and I pretended to some people that I was a portrait artist for a little while, just for a laugh really. I did tell them in the end. But I actually think that being asked what do you do has never been it. It's never been. That's not a positive thing in my opinion. So I don't think that us changing to a new way of defining ourselves is a bad thing. Better opportunities have always led to better occupations, right? So being born into the right circumstances has always set people up for a better potential life with more money, more resources, more opportunities. And we might be heading towards a world where we're judged more on who we actually are and how we express ourselves and treat others as well, rather than what we own or what we've ended up doing to earn money. And I think that would be a wonderful world to live in, where we get to define who we are by our passions and our loves. I will talk endlessly about the negative implications of AI, and I have done, but I try and have a very balanced perspective as much as possible, and I talk about all the benefits and the positives. And it would be hypocritical of me not to do that because I use AI a lot myself. But I think one of the best things that AI could do for us, if it is going to take on a lot of jobs through automation, is to shift the way that we define ourselves as people. If we start defining ourselves through our passions and our loves and our natural abilities and all those things, and we're all part of a rich, diverse society, then that is no bad thing, in my opinion. But when it comes to natural abilities or learnt abilities, I think that adaptability may be, in the future, one of the defining skills that we can have. Now, as I said in the first part of this series, so in lecture 1, we're naturally adaptable as a species. Okay, humans, because of our cognitive abilities, we can adapt really easily and really well to the changing nature of our environments. But we can all be better at this. We can all work on being more open and adaptable in how we live our lives. The way I view it is that in the old world, in the old systems, we could have a sense of predictability about stuff. We knew that if we trained in this particular area, we did this particular thing, we learned this particular thing, then it could lead to this outcome. I think now what we need to do is we need to strengthen our skills in being adaptable, being flexible, being plastic in the new world as it's forming. And that is not easy, because what it means is almost relinquishing to an extent our desire, our need to have that stability and predictability. But if we can, I think it will really help us, all of us. So that's an area that I'm working on myself. And even if you look at Layered Future, that is an adaptation of what I do. I am a lecturer within the formal systems of higher education in the UK. So this platform you're listening or watching this lecture on now is an adaptation of the ways that I have learnt to deliver information. But I'm trying to be more adaptable in the way that I do stuff in my life. And I think adapting and leaning into flexibility are areas everyone should be focusing on. I think that it's that having that flexible approach to how things are going to unfold in the coming years is a really, really positive way to be. And sticking firmly with those positive vibes, section 6 is called Positive Futures. Let's be honest, there's way too much negativity when it comes to what AI is going to do to the world that's already out there. Find them on YouTube. There are millions of videos with people complaining about AI, saying that it's going to ruin humanity, ruin the world, and all that stuff. But I don't think that is the case. I think it's a much more nuanced and balanced future that we're heading into. And one of the important things is that I feel that periods of disruption have always created opportunities for reinvention. So this lecture is not designed to make anyone worried about the future. That's not what I've made this for. Its main goal is to inspire you to prepare for it. That's what I want. I don't want people to be wandering around thinking, oh, goodness me, what's going to happen in 2 years, 3 years? I'm going to lose my job, etc. No, that is not the reason that I'm making this. Because I genuinely think there's going to be some amazing things coming down the track if, there is a bit of an if there, but if we seize opportunities and approach things correctly. The truth is, every major technological revolution has produced winners, losers, and entirely new possibilities. Think for a moment about the Industrial Revolution. It's a really good example of what I'm talking about. And the digital revolution is as well. The intelligence revolution will likely play out in similar ways, in my opinion, but I do think it will have more volatile peaks and troughs. After all, AI, as I said to you before, is a massive amplifier. It tends to amplify speed particularly. So that's always going to cause jolts of disruption, which we're starting to experience now. But that doesn't take away from the fact that every seismic shift in the way things have been done in the technological sphere has created new opportunities. People will lose out. People will win big. And That's what I want you to start thinking about, not worrying. I don't want people to worry. I want them to think, okay, this is happening. This is starting to happen now. How can I capitalize on it? I don't mean how can I become super rich from it? Because I think money is really important for us to be content, happy, stable. But I also think it's highly likely, I haven't got loads of money myself, but I imagine if you had lots of money, it's creating many new issues. So the goal really isn't to become rich through AI. The goal is to see the opportunities that it's bringing down the track and capitalize on them for your life, for what you love doing, what you want to do. How can AI facilitate that? How can you capitalize on your humanity? Yeah. In light of what's going on, how can you make the most of your skills, your passions, all those sorts of things with the changing landscape as it begins to lay new tracks in the pathways of life? Now, I think it's important to be realistic. AI will remove some forms of work, but it's also going to create others that we can't even predict right now. That will be the case, certainly in the short term to medium term. It's already happening. AI is starting to enable entrepreneurship in whole new ways, and the evolution of agentic AI particularly is going to accelerate that. We're moving towards a world where technology can take on a lot of the mundane roles and tasks. So if you're a creative person, an artist, or if you like writing music, you're a musician, or you like creating games, one of the things AI is really good at is doing the legwork that allows you to then focus on the really good stuff. So as an example, if you wanted to be a self-employed artist or an artist who creates work, exhibits it, sells it, then we're moving towards a future very, very rapidly where AI can autonomously take on the distribution of stuff, the creation of a web presence, the creation of social media content, all those different things, while you spend your time in the studio creating work. This isn't sci-fi. This is clearly where we're heading. In fact, AI can already do a lot of those things. It's just you need to kind of bring it together and be a little bit more of an overseer at this stage. And there are 1,000, a million, a billion more opportunities that we haven't got time to discuss here, and we don't know even what most of them are going to be. Not only that, but technology can also amplify human creativity as well as doing all that automation of routine tasks. So as a creative myself, I'm being honest here, I'm not worried about AI replacing creativity, replacing creatives. Because in my opinion, it can never replace human creativity. In fact, not even in my opinion, logically, how can a machine be a human creating? It can't. Okay, so as humans, we are subject to emotions, life experiences, all that stuff. AI can synthesize that, it can simulate that, but it won't be that. So I've never been worried about that. Now, it will replace jobs in the creative sector. So it is going to start, it already is, it's creating imagery for people. People are using it, I should say, to create imagery instead of hiring people to create images. People are using it to create music instead of hiring or paying royalties to musicians. So that will happen. But I'm afraid that is inevitable. No policy is going to be able to regulate that. And we can't get rid of AI, even if we wanted to, because it's so spread across the world and embedded in so many things. And you can run AI locally on a Mac Studio or something. Yeah, so there's a lot of open source stuff out there that people can access. It's not going to go anywhere. So it's going to replace jobs within the creative sector, but it won't ever create human responses to the world. And that's a significant thing. It's not a small thing, it's a really significant thing. People connect to people communicating their feelings. We always have done, and we always will. Because AI can't channel human emotion through the lens of art and expression. It can, again, simulate it, but it can't generate it on its own lived experiences. Now, obviously, one day, probably not in the too distant future, AI will be autonomously generating stuff based on its experience as a synthetic intelligence. But again, it's still not the human perspective on the world, on reality, on the universe. One thing I wanted to say is that I don't think the future is going to be entirely utopian or entirely dystopian. These are states that are often talked about. When you look at videos that are on YouTube, Instagram posts, stuff on Twitter, whatever it, or X, whatever you want to call it, or on TikTok, you'll see loads of stuff about how AI is going to destroy the world. We're going to enter a weird dystopia. And you'll also see people who are saying it's going to save humanity and we'll all be zipping around in little silver cars, like some kind of 1970s vision of what the world would be like in a utopia. But these things are born from fiction. Reality is usually, almost always, much more balanced, and it rarely leads to situations at either end of an extreme scale. Obviously, you get pockets. I mean, there has been, sadly, over the history of humanity, pockets of dystopia that have occurred around the world. And similarly, there are pockets of utopia, but on the broader global scale of things, I think we're unlikely to head into either. The key thing is this, right? So the challenge that we're facing isn't predicting the future perfectly. We can't do that. We can never do that. We can make some really good, educated guesses. And in fact, this channel is a lot of it's about discussing how the future may pan out. I wrote down a note here for myself to remember while I was recording it. It says, predicting the future is impossible. Educated guesses are the best we can hope for, but preparing for a range of eventualities, that's practical and that is intelligent. We should all do that, regardless of, even in micro situations when we're out and about and at work. We don't know what's going to happen. We make some guesses, but we prepare for a range of different eventualities. We don't put all of our chips on the red, on a roulette table. Well, obviously some people do. I would advise against it, all right? Because yes, you're taking a risk. You get a buzz from that if you're gambling, but you get a huge payout if you're right in the world of gambling, but you also lose everything or lose a lot if you're wrong. Okay, final section now. It's called Navigating the New Era. In an age of rapid change, adaptability becomes a form of resilience. I've already talked about the importance of trying to be more adaptable and adopting an adaptable, flexible mindset. I think this is the best advice that anyone can take. We've all got skills and attributes of value, and all of them can be adapted, I think, to a changing landscape. We don't need to worry about a particular specific skill set that we've applied for 10, 20, 30 years to a job role being redundant just because the world is changing. Yeah, sure, that particular use of that skill in that context may quickly or slowly evaporate, but it doesn't mean we can't then apply it in different areas. What we've got to do is reflect on what we do, what we can do, and see how that fits into a range of future landscapes. So if you're creative, then you need to think about how you can adapt to the new world with your creative abilities. If you're someone who has a lot of experience in analysing material, analysing data and drawing conclusions based on that, then again, the way that you will enter the new era will be different. But I strongly believe that critical thinking may become more important than accumulated knowledge. I think it is going to become one of the superpowers, one of the super skills of the future. It's important now, but I think it's going to become more important as we progress into the AI world that's being built. That's because I think that experts in specialisms are eventually going to be overshadowed by experts in critical thinking. Now, that's not to say that I don't think people should become experts in particular subject areas. Being an expert in, the technology of the mobile telephone, or, in telecommunications, or being an expert in bird species of North America isn't important. All of those things, fantastically valuable to us as humans. But I think in the future landscape of commerce and industry, the biggest skill that we can have is to be great critical thinkers, and in our personal lives as well, because we're going to have to decide what's true and what's not true, what's real, what's not real, what's synthetic and what's authentic. All these different questions, critical thinking is going to help us answer. So adaptable people who are great at connecting with tools and information, synthesizing information and drawing reasoned conclusions, I think are going to really flourish in the world that's coming around the corner. So I think in a nutshell, AI is going to rewrite the importance of knowledge and information. And so I think that we need to be adaptable in how we use our human intelligence to flourish in the world that's coming. And this is a new landscape that I advise everyone to prepare for, regardless of age, where you live, the sort of person you are, everything. I think this is something that every human alive needs to begin to prepare for. Unfortunately, the great thing is that everyone can strengthen their skills in critical thinking. It's something that I've helped students to do for years. There are techniques. I will probably do a video on it so I can divulge some of the ways that you can change the way you approach things with more flexibility, looking at different angles, different sides, different perspectives. But whether you're 18 or 80, being able to analyze and judge what we're exposed to is a kind of superpower anyway. And the changing landscape we're entering is going to require this even more. Also, I think that human relationships, creativity and purpose are going to grow in importance as automation expands. I've talked about this in some previous videos, and it's the core philosophy that underpins Layered Future. That's why I've done videos about it over the course of the last year. It summarizes everything that I think and believe, if I'm being honest with you, and I'm really trying to get people to focus on this as we enter a very, very different era. As has always been the case, the future will belong to those who learn to navigate change instead of those who resist it. Now, I'm not saying that people shouldn't question change, shouldn't challenge change, or attempt to control it and sort of shepherd it in the right directions, but change is inevitable. And I think that those who plan their lives around what's happened in the past tend to struggle more with the future. This goes back to what I said about adaptability and openness and flexibility. I would encourage anyone to, instead of focusing on resisting technology, I would focus on critically thinking about how it can be used effectively, where it should be used, where it shouldn't be used, what our human strengths are, what our purpose is, and how we can connect with people, share our creativity, but also our personal perspectives on the world and our emotional perspectives, and all these different things. We know the world is changing, so the challenge is choosing how to change with it, making good decisions, making reasonable decisions over how we adapt our lives, how we use technology, where we don't use technology, as I just said, and what improves the human experience, as well as what weakens it. All of these things are things we should be thinking about as we move forward. Okay, so let's round this up now. If you've watched all 3 parts of this, well done. You're defying the trend, actually, because most people tend to watch 1, 2, 10-minute snaps of things. But if you've watched all of these, then you've sat through, getting close to 3 hours of me talking. Goodness me. Anyway, throughout this series, we have explored how environments shape people. That's how everything started. So in lecture 1, that's what we explored. We've also talked about how technology reshapes environments, because I think that's a really important thing that adjusts who we are and who we become as a particular society in any given generation. We've also looked at how artificial intelligence may accelerate that process further still. We've talked about that a lot within this lecture, because I think that's an area we all need to reflect on. But I think the most important lesson is this. So you take away one thing from this whole series, or if you've just listened to this one lecture, then this is what I'd like you to take away. Tools change, the world changes, and challenges change. But we have always adjusted, learned, and found new ways forward. As a species, we are adaptable. We have always adapted, and we will continue to adapt. We work collaboratively. We work fantastically alone, in small groups, and also we can work globally. Clearly, the future is uncertain. It always will be. We'll never know exactly what's going to happen, but uncertainty is something humanity has always dealt with. We've never known what's coming around the corner. We've built religions around that. We've built ways of working. We've built safety nets, insurance companies, everything. Okay, so we are well versed in uncertainty. Adaptation is and always has been our greatest strength, our cognitive elasticity, the way that we can change and mold ourselves to flourish in the environments that we find ourselves in. Okay, so that brings this series to a close. Thank you so much for listening. I'm going to bring out more deep dive lecture series in the future, little one-off deep dive lectures as well. And from next week, I'm going to return to my normal kind of 10-12 minute videos, but I will return to this format. If you like it, I mean, if I get comments in the future, decent watch times on these videos, then of course I'll make more. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, watching, however you've consumed this, wherever you've been, in the car, walking, in a restaurant with headphones on, whatever you know, I don't mind. But thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to my thoughts. Hopefully you've learned something. Hopefully it's made you think. Even if it's just made you think a little bit, then I've achieved my goal. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you again in the future.